Huh? Oh. Konnichiwa. Welcome back, Otaku, to another episode of Go Mega Otaku Gamer Alpha. I'm your Mega Otaku Gamer. I am Ken-chan. And today we're looking at something that might just confuse you a little bit. If so, I apologize. But we've all been there, haven't we? I'm sure you've been there before. You know, the situation where you're trying to figure something out, and it just doesn't make any sense, and it gets more confusing. And the more you try to figure it out, the harder it gets, the more questions that you have, and you can't answer any of the questions. And pretty soon it just gets out of control, and you're ready to pull your hair out and do something crazy because you're just confused. Well, today we're going to talk about something that can be confusing. It's a machine that, for its time, like many of the machines that like it at the time, were very confusing. I'm talking about home computers of the early 80s, and one home computer in particular, the Atari 800 XL. This is the Atari 800 XL home computer. And like most home computers of that time, it really didn't do much of anything. It played games in a slot up here. You could program it in BASIC, and all you had to do was learn from a bunch of really crazy, thick books and things like that in order to learn how to use that. But it was a programmable game machine is what it ended up being, and a lot of homebrew games were born out of that. This is the Atari 1050 disk drive, and this was basically made to go with this. Now, this also works with other Atari 8-bit computers, but I have mine connected to this here, and that's a good setup, and it gets a little confusing on how to use, but hopefully today we're going to clear up some of that confusion. But first, before we go into the disk drive and what all that does, let's have a look at the machine itself and some of the games that came on the cartridge format right there. Of course, the machine was made, like all Atari, old Atari 8-bit machines, it was made for this kind of a controller here, the ever-famous Chumpster Atari controller, like you had for the 2600. This worked on pretty much all of the old Atari 8-bit machines. But they're clunky, they're spastic, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of that, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret tip of mine. Sega Genesis controllers work on all of these machines too. So I hope I haven't confused you already. Don't get confused. There's going to be plenty of time for confusion later. The games for this system came in these little cartridges. Smaller than a 2600 cartridge. No end label. It just says left cartridge. Because on the Atari 800 computer, not the 800 XL, which is this, but the 800 computer actually had two cartridge slots. One for a left cartridge, one for a right cartridge. Left cartridges were usually applications, you know, games, things like that. Right cartridge was, well, some kind of memory expansion. It was meant for like games. Some games were supposed to have two cartridges. They never actually used it that much. But for something like this, all you really need is one slot. There's no need for two. So we had one, and it's right here. Now hold on. You're getting ahead of yourself here. Let's start with the basics, or in this case, let's start with the basic. The basic, or basic programming, basic computer language, was what you got when you turned the machine on, with no cartridge in the bay. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that right now. We're going to go ahead and we're going to turn this right on right here. And it boots up right there. And ready. That's the default for the machine itself. It goes right to Atari Basic. Now the information that I'm going to give you actually pertains to the entire Atari 8-bit line of computers, not just one computer. Okay, the 8-bit line of computers from Atari was released in November of 1979. It was discontinued in January of 1992. That's a long time. The CPU was an MOS Technology 6502B. Here in the good old States, the NTSC version was a 1.79 megahertz central clock. The graphics were 320 by 192, 256 colors, 4x sprites. It had 4x oscillators with noise mixing, or 2x AM digital. Connectivity, they had a joystick, up to 4. Some of them had 4 ports for joysticks. This particular machine has 2. ROM cartridge, SIO, PBI. Crap that you don't understand, and neither do I. And then the successor was the Atari ST. Now, this machine is connected to, rather, an Atari 1050 disk drive. The disk operating system that was put in there, that was made by Microsoft, by the way, used about 6K of memory. The 800XL from Atari is a 64K machine, similar to and released to compete with the Commodore 64. When attached, however, to the 1050 disk drive, 6 kilobytes were used to run the disk operating system, so it was actually 58K that was available to the machine for graphics, for games, that kind of thing. Confused yet? Well, where's that Ms. Pac-Man game? Let's get back to that and look at some of these games after all. Well, you slide that right in there. Snap that on. Look over here. Ho-ho! Ms. Pac-Man. Let's have a look. Now, on the machine itself, to get the thing started, you have your reset button, your option button, your select button, your start button, and your help button. And this is your start button here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to press that. Using the Genesis controller. Sorry, had to turn the volume up. Aw, you prick. And you see a pretty ample version of Ms. Pac-Man here. This actually kind of looks like it for once. Versus things on, other Atari machines that don't look like the game they're supposed to be. Little regular Pac-Man. Good old Nintendo with their Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong. Little Robotron 2084 for you. Dig Dug. Oh! Boo! Let me get this prick. What? Maybe I'm not. You're done, buddy. Oh, I got away, you little freak. Now these are the invaders right here. Don't ask me what that rocket ship is for. That's something I think they threw in to make it a little bit more, I don't know, something. But the invaders, the space invaders, they come out of that thing. Okay, well that's all well and good, and that is not that hard to do, and that's not that confusing, and you get better control out of your machine if you use a Sega Genesis controller than you do if you use the old Atari chumpy controllers. I keep the Atari chumpy controllers around for show and not for blowing. They're there to say, oh look, here's an Atari controller, but when I really want to get down and dirty and play the thing, I plug in a Sega Genesis controller. I get a lot better results that way. Okay, well that's all well and good. Pretty standard, you know, you put a cartridge into an old game system, you turn it on. It's usually the way that works. That's the way that's supposed to work. But now we're going to get into something that starts to get a little hairy, a little confusing. We're going to get into these discs. And these discs are floppy disks that they actually flop. Look at that. Flop, flop, flop. Flop, flop, flop. It flops. Now, these get confusing because you have to... First, you have to turn on the disk drive, or the machine? No, first you have to have a disk in... no. First, you have to have a disk in the drive, and then you turn it on. First you have to... No, you... Oh, what the... This doesn't tell you anything. Okay, yeah, this is just useless too. Crap. Is it this? Should be somewhere in here, you would think. Maybe it's this somewhere? I'm starting to get that confused feeling. You know, confused. Like I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Ah, don't worry, Otaku. I know exactly what I'm doing. In order for your disk drive to work properly, you have to have an operating system disk. And this operating system disk, this disk operating system, another name for it, or DOS, is actually made by Microsoft. Believe it or not, Bill Gates wrote DOS for all kinds of machines back in the beginning of all this. Now, this is for the actual disk itself. The master diskette, as it says there. Now, what you want to do is you want to make a copy of this. You don't want to have to use this. You want to make as many copies of this as you can, because once this is gone, the whole thing is shot. The disk drive's no longer any good, and where else are you going to get this? So you make sure you get yourself some blank floppy disks like this. Make copies. Step 1, turn on the disk drive. Now, ignoring this red light here, which is the power light, there's another red light here that is now off. Means that the disk drive is ready. Watch it go on when I put the disk in. Here goes the system disk. This is going to load the disk operating system into the disk drive first. Close that. There's the red light. It's working. It'll sit there and do this for about 15 seconds, and then it's out. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to leave that in there for now. Step 2, turn on the Atari 800XL. Now you might be able to hear that beep, 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 beep thing. That's the disk operating system loading up into the 800XL from the disk drive. If you don't boot this stuff in this order, you get a boot error message and you have to start all over. Now, of course, that's how you do your disk operating system, to load the operating system into the machine, to copy disks, etc., etc. But as I said, we're not into that right now. What we're into doing is looking at some of the disk-based games. And we have here a classic. We have the original Castle Wolfenstein. Not to be confused with Wolfenstein 3D that you find on your Atari Jaguar. And this works basically the same way. What you do here is you turn on your disk drive. You feed your disk into the disk drive. Wait for the red light to go out. It's out. Turn on your Atari 800XL. Now what happens? Beep, 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 beep. Again. Watch this. This is nothing short of incredible, people. Because all of a sudden, whoa, look at that. Ain't that something? I think it is. Castle Wolfenstein. Now, your guess is as good as mine as to what the hell you're actually supposed to do in this game. But here we are. This is the original Castle Wolfenstein. I walk up to that guy and press this. And nothing happens. Now I want to come out of here. Oh, I'm in another room, and there's guys with huge swastikas on them walking around in here. I have no idea how to get around them. I just hit that guy. I'm caught. Ah, yes, it's Astro Chase on the Atari 800XL. This was a disc game. The graphics for this are quite stunning for the time. And of course, this is like an intro video that they do, which wasn't common. But again, your guess is as good as mine as what the hell you're supposed to do here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to push start. Now we move around here, and we avoid those things. Oh! Avoid those things, not crash into them. You freak. Get out of there. Get out of there. Okay. Now every time you hit something, you bounce off of it. That much I know. Man, there's a lot of Saturns out here. That's a, what's this? I can't get to that. Okay, that's a power-up that allows me to cruise right through everybody. Look at that. So are you confused yet? Is this really making you confused? Is it making your head hurt? Is it making you crazy? All this stuff you have to do just to be able to play games on this thing? Yes, so I'd like to add a little bit of commentary about computers from this era. This is a little program that I wrote here. I have several that I've written in BASIC. One that converts light years to miles, and it can also tell you how long it would take you traveling at the speed of the space shuttle to get to a star that's 4 light years away. It uses floating point calculation, and I can tell you right now that to take you a long time. But anyway, computers from this era had something that modern computers don't have. Modern computers have power. They can do a lot of things. They have a lot of applications, a lot of software. There's no mystery left to them at all. These machines from this era, they had personality. There were so many different computers from this era. You had Atari, you had Commodore, you had Texas Instruments, you had Timex Sinclair. But anyhow, the personality of these machines is undeniable. I mean, look at this. Where can you get something like this? You can't really do stuff like this anymore. And it's something that really is interesting, fascinating, and in and of itself, just trying to figure out how to program these things is in itself kind of like a game. Not a game I like to spend a lot of time on, but it is a challenge, and it does put your brain to work. And so you've just been given a taste of the Atari 800 XL and the Atari 1050 disk drive working together to provide you with a unique and confusing gaming experience at times, but unique experience nonetheless. And of course, with those old Atari 8-bit games, you can't go wrong. Thanks for watching. This has been Go Mega Otaku Gamer Alpha. I'm your Mega Otaku Gamer. I am Ken-chan. I'll see you next time.